and construction law from Chicago, Illinois. We're helping to create the next generation of lawyers with high emotional intelligence through a weekly book club and daily practical posts at facebook.com/lawyersEQ. During our book club discussions, we'll do a deep dive into books that will help us develop emotional intelligence skills and specifically think about how we can begin to use those skills in our law practices. I will be live every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Central for this discussion. And today I'll be I'm trying to live stream, multi-stream on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. I want to make this a discussion. Please liberally use the comments box to ask questions or to make comments. I certainly don't sit here as an expert by any stretch of the imagination. On the contrary, I'll be learning along with all of you, and I'm really interested in hearing your opinions and observations. I really do look forward to learning from all of you. So as you may know, it's been a while since we've had a book club discussion, but I did feel a need to bring it back, and that's because of a prevailing problem that's occurring due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And that is that everyone is grieving. We're in some stage of grief. And that's because we've all lost something. We've lost, in some cases, our way of life, our freedom. We can't go to the places that we all used to go. We're pretty much hunkered down, except for, occasional grocery shopping, maybe a walk to walk the dog. So we've lost our way of life, our freedom. In some cases, we've lost our income. In that lots of people, millions of people, have lost their jobs or had pay cuts or had benefits reduced, employment. And then, of course, some people have had sick family members or have actually lost people to the virus. So we're each going through our own stage of grief. And so let me just go through just those stages, and we can sort of relate those stages to what's happening in the pandemic. So the first stage, of course, is denial. So I think most of us, when this pandemic or when the virus started spreading, we all thought, this is just a problem that's in Asia. It's really not going to come to the United States. It's really not going to be a problem for us. And I think a lot of people are still, in some stage of denial. And we'll talk about why we want to get to the last step, which is, of course, is acceptance. But number two is anger. And we've seen a lot of anger across the spectrum around our nation. People who are angry about what's happening with the virus, what's happening with their family, what's happening with their jobs. And a lot of people are angry about the government, what the government has done or has not done to prevent the virus from spreading, from maybe some people thinking that the government is doing too much, some people saying the government isn't doing enough, but a lot of people are angry around the country. The third stage is bargaining. This is a stage where people are just trying to make sense of what's going on. And really, they would do anything for things to go back to the way they were. The fourth step is depression. A lot of people who just can't take what's happening, who is just in total shock for the way things have happened in terms of our employment and our health, and what's happening with our kids' schools and that sort of thing. So we have a lot of people that have gone to coping mechanisms to, things like alcohol sales have, gone up tremendously. At least that's anecdotal evidence. So a lot of people are depressed. And what I would say is, what I'm going to talk about today, certainly it's not a replacement for, a doctor's advice or the advice of a medical professional. Certainly seek help if you need it, because sometimes depression you can't get out of it on your own, and you do need assistance with either medication or a therapist, licensed therapist, or things of that nature. So depression, and then finally acceptance, and that's where we all want to get to, because that's really the only stage of life where we can plan and take the actions that we need to take. So, and I do believe that emotional intelligence skills are part of the solution to helping us to get to acceptance. So let me just switch over to the slideshow. And if whoever's watching, if you could just make a comment, just let me know if the audio is good. If you just want to type something in, just to let me know, that would be really appreciated. So let me head over to the slides. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, so a little bit about me. I graduated in 2003 from DePaul here in Chicago. I'm senior counsel at a firm called Picard and Abramson. It's a firm that is really based out of New Jersey. We obviously have an office in Chicago, but we have offices around the country as well. I'm a civil litigator. I also have a practice in construction law, environmental law, and actually our firm is mostly known as a construction firm because we service the construction industry. We have a lot of general contractors as our clients, but we run the whole gamut from commercial litigation to employment to environmental to those niche construction law issues. And so while we service the construction industry as well as a lot of other industries, we do run the gamut in terms of services. So my mission is to identify and share historically correct knowledge and resources in an inspiring and entertaining format in order to help others meet and exceed goals and standards in every area of their lives. And that's what I'm hoping to do with this broadcast, with this book club, with everything else that I do. And so what are we going to be talking about today? So we're going to talk about emotional intelligence, obviously, but I'm going to give you some context and how I've used it to change my life and how you can too. How we went through a similar economic calamity 10 years ago, how it affected me, how I used emotional intelligence to get to acceptance during that period of my life and to take action, and how I'm also just on the journey to developing these skills, and that they've already made a tremendous impact on my life. And then finally, we're going to talk about how lawyers can use emotional intelligence skills to build a practice that is sustainable, successful, and profitable. So let's go back 10 years to the economic recession of 2018, 2007 to 2013. Let's remind ourselves what happened is that according to the U.S. Department of Labor, legal services employment fell from a high of 1.18 million in July 2007 to 1.11 million in 2010. That's a drop of 70,000 jobs, or nearly 6% of the legal workforce. And so what happened is, I was one of those people that was let go in approximately 2009. I was, as I said, I went to DePaul, and then I did a 2L summer clerkship at a prestigious, national firm in Chicago. And then a year and a half after that, I moved to a different, again, large national, international firm. And, I learned a tremendous lot at that firm. I enjoyed my time there. But then, it just happened to be sort of the fourth wave of layoffs came, and it got me, just like it got so many people around the country, and especially lawyers really felt the brunt of that. So, but it wasn't just, I think, that the recession that really hurt lawyers, but we were also facing bigger problems than just that economic collapse. And these concepts come from an article from Professor Susan Daycoff entitled Expanding the Lawyer's Toolkit of Skills and Competencies. She says that, and I mean, this is true, right? Clients began pressuring us to be more affordable, economical, efficient, and accountable. I mean, that happened in the 2000s. And we also saw clients looking for alternative sources of legal assistance. So that would be your do-it-yourself legal services like LegalZoom. I think, like those LegalZoom commercials started occurring, I think in the 2000 time period. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but so people started thinking that legal services are pretty much just a commodity, and thought that they could just do it themselves, or find a service that will do it really on the cheap. Um, and then we also saw the outsourced legal research occurring. So these are companies that actually will do legal research and then put a memo together, and that'll be bundled in a way that'll be much cheaper than if you hired a law firm to do that research, have an associate or whatever or whoever do that research. And so I even saw that at the second firm that I was at, where I was doing some brief writing for a big international company, and we had to use a service to do some of that research that would go into the brief. I obviously needed to check that research, but the initial go around was done by an outsourced company. And then, of course, limited scope representation has been coming up, ever since the 2000 time period as well. This is where instead of maybe taking on an entire case, the client will only have the lawyer represent him or her for a very short task or very limited task, and then the client presumably would act as his or her own attorney in that instance. So we're seeing all of that increasing now. And then clients began asking for, quote, sustainable legal outcomes that attempt to limit the fees incurred. So the very, very cost consciousness on behalf of our clients. All of those changes combined with law student debt that, of course, everyone is running into has led to an above average incidence of depression, substance abuse, and other psychological distress among lawyers. And the economic changes also meant that traditional legal skills and smarts are not enough to allow a lawyer to succeed. And so let me just get back to the camera real quick. And so, that's exactly, what happened to me in terms of getting laid off. Is that I think, my firm, obviously, with all other firms around the country and around the world, businesses, we're cutting people, and just looking around and seeing, well, we have a lot of smart people. Our firm is full of smart people. Now, what are we going to do? Who are we going to cut? And so they weren't going to cut their rainmakers. They weren't going to cut the people that were dramatically busy, if people were busy at the time. So I was seen as expendable because I didn't sort of have those legal. I had the legal skills, I had the knowledge, I had the smarts, but I didn't have the clients. I didn't have the soft skills, if you will, that would allow me to make myself as valuable as possible to my employer. So let's go back to the slides. And by the way, if you're watching online, there's that website, the tiny.cc link, that'll take you directly to the slides. So if you want to download them or look at them as we go on and have them for future reference, they'll be there. So I think that, and I think it's been my experience, is that emotional intelligence skills may be part of the solution for the profession's woes. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what emotional intelligence is, what skills are available to lawyers, and then we're going to talk about how I use them back 10 years ago. I'm going to talk about how I think we can use them in this COVID-19 world, and then we're going to talk about tactics, exactly what to do. So, definition of emotional intelligence is the ability to identify and manage one's emotions as well as the emotions of others. And that's the definition from Psychology Today. There's a book, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, which is written by Travis Bradbury and Gene Graves. Let me enable the camera here so y'all can see it. Great book. The best thing about the book is that you're able to actually take a test to determine where you are, where your weaknesses are in emotional intelligence. And it has specific tactics when you actually increase your skills. So this is good, like our primary text, and then we have secondary text along the way in this book club. Okay, so back to what emotional intelligence is. So it's really four primary emotional intelligence skills, and they're really in two categories. The first is the personal competencies. So looking at yourself, skills that pertain to yourself. First of all, you have self-awareness. Self-awareness is your ability to accurately perceive your own emotions in the moment and understand your tendencies across situations. So essentially that means looking at what your emotion is at this moment in time, and then understand what your triggers are that's going to trigger certain emotions as well. The second personal competency is self-management. It's your ability to use your awareness of your emotions to stay flexible and direct your behavior positively. And this means managing your emotional reactions to situations and people. So you're using your self-awareness to manage your own behavior, to manage your emotions, and to change your behavior as a result. So if you're in a meeting with somebody and you know that you're in a bad mood, for example, but you need to impress somebody, or you need to provide them with advice, well, you have to direct your behavior, change your behavior to not be in accordance with what your emotions are. Or you have to know, for example, that you're just in a bad mood and you have to do your best to cope with that. So that's self-awareness and self-management. Then we have the social competencies. So this is this is looking at other people. So social awareness is your ability to accurately pick up on emotions in other people and understand what is really going on with them. This often means perceiving what other people are thinking and feeling, even if you don't feel the same way. Right. So in that example, when you're across the table from somebody, a social awareness is under picking up cues from them, that person, so you know what sort of emotions they're having. So it's things like facial expressions, tone of voice, um, uh, and those sorts of things that allow you to pick up on what they're feeling, what their emotions are. And then relationship management is using your ability. It's basically putting it all together. It's your ability to use your awareness of your emotions and those of others to manage interactions successfully. So you know what you're feeling, you're directing your own behavior. You know what the other person is feeling, and you're able to put all of that together to have a successful interaction with the person that's sitting across from you. So that's how emotional intelligence works. Again, some disclaimers. This is, again, emotional intelligence is not a replacement for necessary psychological or medical treatment. Consult a doctor or other medical professional. I am not a doctor, I am a lawyer. So make sure that you are getting the treatment that you need. Emotional intelligence is not a replacement for any of that, but I think they're very helpful skills. So how did I use emotional intelligence, and how do I use it every day? So I took the Emotional Intelligence 2.0 test to find out where my emotional intelligence skills are weakest and where I should start. So I found out that my weakest area is self-management. And the three biggest or three weakest parts of self-management for me are resisting change, letting stress get the better of me, and brushing people off when something is bothering me. And I think anyone who knows me knows that those are probably the weakest areas. And certainly back when I took this test in 2009, 2010, whenever it was, that resisting change was the reason why I was having a hard time back then. Not that wasn't the reason I got laid off, but it was the reason why that was such a big shock to my system. And so the skill that goes along with change that the Emotional Intelligence 2.0 book suggests is to accept that change is just around the corner. And I know that sounds that's like a really weak thing, right? Accepting that change is just around the corner. Well, it does give you some very specific ways to look at it. So, number one, the first step is to admit to yourself that even the most stable, trusted facets of your life are not completely under your control. So, pretty much think of anything in your life, your job, your relationship, whether or not you have power in your house. That all of those things are not. There are certain facets of those categories that are not completely under your control. You can pay your electricity bill. You can have light bulbs in your lighting fixtures. You can have your appliances plugged in. But if a storm comes and knocks out the electricity, your power is going to go out unless you have a generator, right? And so electricity, which is a basic, necessity of life, is not completely under your control. And that goes with your job and with your relationships, with everything, right? The second step is when you allow yourself to anticipate change and understand your options if changes occur, you prevent yourself from getting bogged down by strong emotions like shock, surprise, fear, and disappointment when changes actually happen. So I think that's, as I said, in the stages of grief discussion that I was talking about earlier, people are in shock, surprise, fear, and disappointment, and they're having very, very strong emotions, and they're within that range in the stages of grief, right? And that is because we did not fully anticipate the changes that were coming. We didn't believe that a virus was going to come from China, that it was going to shut down our economy, that it was going to make people, sick, and that millions of people were going to be either furloughed or out of work. So, but if we had anticipated that, then we would not necessarily have gotten bogged down in those strong emotions. And the third step is, while you're likely to experience some negative emotions, your acceptance that change is an inevitable part of life enables you to focus and think rationally, which is critical to making the most out of an unlikely, unwanted, and otherwise unforeseen situation. So in other words, if we all had come to grips and anticipated that change was going to occur, we would have moved through those stages of grief much quicker. Now, I am not by any stretch of the imagination judging anybody here. On the contrary, I think everybody should have a little bit of empathy for each other and for themselves, because no matter where we are sort of on the stages of grief, we're all somewhere else and we're all in a different situation. And so for somebody to say, well, I can't believe that you're, I don't know, watching so much television, or you're, whatever the coping mechanism is, or you're crying all the time, or whatever it is, we certainly have to understand and have empathy for that person because, yeah, because you may have a skill, an emotional intelligence skill that's more developed than that other person. That doesn't make the other person, bad or what have you. It just means that they're in a different place than you are. So, and by the way, just because you have emotional intelligence skills doesn't mean that you're perfect by any stretch of the imagination. It means you're still going to have ups and downs. And so having a little empathy for yourself is very helpful as well. So at the end of the day, what we're suggesting is the best way to accept change is to take responsibility and accountability to prepare for the changes that will occur. So what the book suggests is implementing a strategy by, number one, setting aside a small amount of time to create a list of important changes that you think could possibly happen. So in other words, look at the worst case scenario of the things that could happen in your life. So things that could happen to your job. You could become unemployed. You could get sick. You could get divorced. Someone could steal someone could break into your apartment. You could get your computer could get hacked. Just like think of the worst case scenario, and then write out possible actions that you will take should the change occur. So the power example is a very easy one, right? So if the power were to go out, I would have candles, or I would have flashlights. I would have a range of things that could happen if the electricity were to go out for whatever reason. And then write down ideas for things that you can do now to prepare for that change. So if my power was to go out, the best way to prepare for that change would be maybe I would get a generator, right? Then I would get flashlights. I would get candles and make sure I have a lighter, like that, those sorts of things. And we'll get into the specifics, and that's the first emotional intelligence skill, which is to accept that change is right around the corner. And for those of you who have been with me for a while, the book that we used to talk about that skill is a book called "Who Moved My Cheese" by Dr. Spencer Johnson. It's a book about mice who have had their cheese moved around from time to time, and it's a metaphor for life, right? And what is cheese? What is the cheese in the book? Well, it is what we want to have in our life. So that could be our job, our relationship. It can be money. It can be a big house, freedom, health, recognition, spiritual peace, activities like jogging and golf, right? Those are the things that we want in life. Maybe not jogging and maybe not golf if you're me, but for a lot of people like to golf. So let's just talk about in this example, in this economy, in our situation now, what changes happened. So in terms of jobs around the United States, around the world are changing. If you still have a job, you're working from home, you're using technology more than ever, you're on Zoom, you're on whatever you are, you're on your cell phone a lot to actually communicate with your business partners, with your colleagues, instead of just walking down to the office next door. Again, a lot of people are out of work, so a lot of people are on unemployment looking for government assistance. Relationships, I think, are much different than they were 6 months ago. If you're someone who lives with your partner or your spouse, it's much different because you are in a situation where maybe you were only seeing your spouse for a few hours every day, and then on the weekends. Now you're with your partner for, potentially 24 hours a day. And so that going through that change, that's, that cheese has been moved. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's just something that has changed in our lives. And in addition, the same with the kids, right? If you have children, they've gone from, being gone all day to school to now being in your house, potentially 24 hours a day as well. So that those relationships have changed. Money, relationship to money is quite different. As I said, with people being out of work, pay cuts happening, people are stressed out about money, about where it's coming from, if government assistance is on its way, what's happening with the loans to small businesses, paycheck protection plans, and the like. Housing. Housing may be different as well if you're struggling with income and you don't know where your next rent payment or mortgage payment is going to come from. Maybe you're negotiating with your lenders, with your mortgage company, with your landlord to put those payments on the back end. And so housing is now an issue. Freedom's a huge issue right now, where you have where you once were able to basically go wherever you want and go to stores, go to the club, go for a jog, exercise. All of that is now freedom is much more limited. Health is a big deal now. Whereas we weren't worried about great viruses 6 months ago. Now it's right on the forefront. It's putting people in the hospital in critical condition. It's killing people. So health is now on the forefront. Recognition is actually much different now than it was. And the thing that I'm thinking about in particular are things like graduations, where we were going to have graduations in the month of May, and now people are not going to be able to gather for graduation. So we don't know what schools are going to do, if it's going to be something like virtual graduation, or if graduations are going to go into the summertime. We don't really know what's going to happen, but everyone's recognition is going to be different. Spiritual peace, much different. Whereas we were able to go to church on Sundays or every day if you had a church that was open, like for morning mass or and that sort of thing. Now we're no matter what religious denomination you are, you're watching it from home, and it's much different watching a church service at home than it is when you're actually there. So spiritual piece is different. And then, of course, activities. Every activity, every outside activity or activity that takes place outside of your house is much different. Jogging, yes, you can still jog, but you have to be careful with who's passing you and keeping socially distant. Golf, I think a lot of places golf is closed. And so that is the change that we have now seen in our lives. And so here are the key lessons about change that come from the book Who Moved My Cheese. The first is that change happens, that they keep moving the cheese. And now we're going through a tremendous amount of change in our life at the moment, but it's true that change happens all the time. It doesn't take a big problem with a virus to see change occur. Change happens all the time. Job changes get made. Family changes get made. School changes get made. People get into car accidents. I mean, it's funny. I mean, in terms of change, I got into a car accident maybe like 3 or 4 months ago, and I was just driving, had bought some like drive-through dinner, had my little guy in the car, and just out of nowhere I just got hit from the side, and it was just this teenage girl who probably wasn't paying attention or whatever, but there was really I didn't even see her coming, so there was nothing I can do to even, get out of the way, really. And so that change happened whether I liked it or not. And that wasn't a time of calamity or economic recession. It was, pretty much in the high times. And so no matter if we're in a low time or a high time, changes can still happen and will happen. The next part is to anticipate change. So getting ready for the cheese to move. So I think, thinking back to sort of the stages of grief and being in denial in terms of this virus, it would have been great if we could have anticipated what was going to happen with this virus. Or back 10 years ago, I could have anticipated that I would have got laid off because of the economics. But I think the fact is that there were some hints, right? I don't think, even though we all pretend that we were caught off guard, I think if we would have really been paying attention to, number one, the economy 10 years ago, but also what was happening with the virus in the present times, we could have anticipated at least some change was going to come our way. The next part is to monitor change. So smelling the cheese often so you know when it's getting old. And that's what I was talking about. If we would have monitored the situation and knowing what was going to occur, we could have anticipated change a little better. But now what are we going to do? So going forward, we're still in a time, I think, of questions, where we certainly don't know how long we're going to be locked down. We don't know if you're a lawyer, we don't know when courts are going to open. We don't know when our clients' businesses are going to reopen. And so we need to, at this point, monitor the change, because change is still going on, right? So we need to monitor what's happening within our law firms, within our practices, what's happening with our clients. So we know if there's going to be some bad events with either our clients or with our law firms, we'll know to be able to move. And that's the next step, is to adapt to change quickly. So we're anticipating change, we're monitoring changes, and then when that we can get ready to adapt to that change. And so what the book says is the quicker you let go of old cheese, the sooner you can enjoy new cheese. So we need to let go of what happened in the past. Sitting in the present moment, we have to let go of, not we can't we're not going to forget, that we're able to go to the gym and we're able to take a train. But we have to, in our own minds, sort of let go of that situation, because then we can start to enjoy what we have. And I think there's so much that we can enjoy, and we'll get to that in a moment. So the next step is to change, move with the cheese. So, just because circumstances change around us doesn't mean that we change. So like a lot of people, I think, we're treating the lockdown orders as kind of like a short vacation, right? Where, we're just going to be, hunkered down for a few days. And so, I'll just spend, a couple days in my pajamas and that's it. No, that hasn't happened, and it probably won't happen for quite some time, that we're going to go back to where we were. So to be able to change is really important part. And then to enjoy the change is the next step, to savor the adventures and enjoy the taste of the new cheese. And so I think a lot of us who it's difficult, I think, to see, and they call it silver linings, right? So things like, you see the like maps online of how the climate and air pollution has cleared up as a result of people not driving cars anymore. And because economic production and industry is down. But there are a lot of things to enjoy about the change that occurred, and we're not going to be able to enjoy it unless we have gone through these steps. We can enjoy spending more time with our families. We can enjoy cooking more. If we have more time on our hands, we can enjoy, playing a musical instrument or, I don't know, playing video games with our friends or what have you, helping people, making masks for people, whatever it is, whatever we decide to do, but we can do it with some enjoyment because we anticipated it, we're changing, and we're adapted to the change, and we've made acceptance. We're at the acceptance level, and so we're able to enjoy it. And then the last step is to be ready to change quickly and enjoy it again and again. So keep moving with the cheese because change is going to happen whether we like it or not. And if we stay in the acceptance mode and we stay in the ability to adapt to change, then we're able to change quickly and we're going to be able to enjoy when the change happens. So what did I do to change my resistance to change? And this is, basically after the recession of, 2009. That's when I started in my new job with the firm I'm at now. And so I looked at the worst case scenario. I prepared myself for the next layoff. And I did that by preparing myself financially, by paying off debt and saving an emergency fund. We made sure as a family not to be dependent on my primary legal job in order to eat. So I ended up actually getting, I call it a second job on the slide, but it's actually like a very part-time thing. I started refereeing hockey, which took up a lot of my time before, 3 months ago. And then we made a decision as a family to have my wife go back to school, and now she's teaching. So we were able to add some of that supplementary income. And then I started taking classes online to develop additional businesses. I'm still sort of in that process 10 years later, but it's been fun. And then I did everything I could to prevent it, the worst thing from happening again. So I did that by going over and above my billable hour requirement, by doing the work that's in front of me and building a cushion. And I think all of us can do that right now in our firms. Each of us are in a different stage of business right now. Some of us are extremely busy. Some of us have time on their hands. But whatever we have in front of us is the work that we should do. I think especially when times are low, we tend to not actually do that work for whatever reason, or we just procrastinate on it for whatever reason. So whatever work you have, make sure you're doing in front of you, make sure you're putting in your time, filling out your timesheets, what have you, because you want to make sure that your firm understands your value. And a lot of times in dire economic situations, dollar signs is all the firms are worried about, making sure that they have money coming in the door. And the only way they're going to have money coming in the door is if you fill out your timesheets and actually do the work that's in front of you. So that's a very important thing, very important lesson in this economy. And then I also, try to develop a book of business. I ramped up my networking. I started a blog, as I mentioned. One of my practice areas is environmental law. And so I started the Illinois Environmental Law blog. And so I've gotten clients from that as well. I've developed a podcast called the Lawyer Lifestyle Podcast, which is sort of a daily podcast that deals with marketing, sales, and leadership. And I give tips every day on that. I've also been more involved in bar association work. I started reading books and attending conferences about sales, marketing, and leadership. And I also took extreme ownership, meaning, really, I am responsible for creating, my own economy. And really, there's no one that is going to be able to do it but me. So I try to take responsibility for every aspect of my life. And of course, I don't succeed in that every day. I fail just about every day. But that is something that I try to do. And then also I set 10x goals in every facet of my life, meaning just some very outrageous goals that I'm trying to meet, and that helps me to be encouraged to continue on and to do better and to grow in every aspect of my life. So what do we have to do to accept the change that is here due to COVID-19? Again, I think we have to get to acceptance. And there are lots of ways to get there. We talked about a lot of strategies. One strategy that I didn't talk about yet is sort of thinking about doing an asset assessment. So what are the things that you have that's valuable in terms of physical assets? So what money you have in the bank, what looking, if you're in a room, wherever you are right now, just like looking around you, like I'm in my office, so I have a, computer, I have a cell phone, I have books, I have a printer, I have a desk, lots of things that have sort of intrinsic value, although the desk I don't think has much intrinsic value, but, and then thinking about not only your physical material assets, but also your relationship assets. So your family, your friends, your work associates, your business partners, your clients. These are the people that are rooting for you to do well and are also in sort of the same situation. So thinking about it like that, thinking about the fact that no matter what has happened, we do have a lot of good in our lives. That's a great first step on getting to acceptance. And then the next step is to look at that worst case scenario. What is the worst thing that could happen during this time? And for me, other than sort of the health things, so like someone getting sick, but thinking about more business related. The worst thing that could happen, business related, is that you could get laid off, or your firm could collapse. But then looking at it further, how long do you think we're going to be locked down? A lot of people, I think, are, right now, today is, April 22nd. Lots of people are thinking this is going to be another month. So mid-May is when we're going to go back to work. But there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. In fact, probably the worst case scenario in that regard is that, we're sitting at home for the next 6 months, 7 months. So that would be another 7 months of people not working, another 7 months of businesses going out of business, of firms cutting or closing. And so that's probably the worst case. I mean, it's hard to think about, and it's probably not going to happen. But in order to get ready for that worst case scenario, to prepare yourself, to get yourself mentally strong, you have to look at that worst case scenario and then develop an action. Number 2 or 3 is to develop an action plan to prevent it from occurring. So you can't necessarily stop the economy from doing what it's going to do, and you certainly can't stop a governor or a president from keeping things shut down for 6 or 7 months. But in terms of how that affects you personally, well, you could pivot your law firm if you're a solo or a small firm, and you have clients right now that are basically furloughed or closed. Then you should develop an action plan to pivot to clients that are still in business. So maybe you're going to go from representing a restaurant or I don't know hair salons to school districts, or trying to think, maybe not construction companies, but grocery stores, places that are, maybe you're going to try to get in at Amazon. So those are the things that you want to think about in terms of clients. And then what other things, like keeping a financial reserve, or maybe you do want to start thinking, if you haven't already, start thinking about making financial cuts, financial decisions. And of course, as a leader, you're going to be the first person that's going to take that cut. But then so you want to have an action plan to prevent the worst from happening to your life. And then you want to develop an action plan in the event that it does occur. In the event that your firm closes, in the event that in the event that your clients, don't come back, you want to get going. And so I'm not here to be a doom and gloom person, but I am here to say, if you prepare yourself for the change that is, to accept the change that's occurring right now, and to get ready for the changes that the worst case scenario that will happen and that may happen in the future, then you're going to prepare yourself, and you're not going to have a deep sense of depression or loss if that worst case scenario occurs. So that's about change, and that we talked about that sort of in our last session. That was a while ago, and I wanted to make sure I did a good recap for everyone if you're brand new to this book club. And so what we're going to dive into now is stress, which, again, we talked about stress is a big deal for attorneys for various reasons. And it's also a big deal for dealing with this pandemic. According to the CDC, fear and anxiety about a disease can be overwhelming. We know that. And it can cause strong emotions in adults and children. So stress during an infectious disease outbreak can include fear and worry about your own health and the health of your loved ones, changes in sleep and eating patterns, difficulty sleeping or concentrating, worsening of chronic health problems, worsening of mental health conditions, or increased use of alcohol, tobacco, or other drugs. So in other words, the coping mechanisms, right? And then you can we're adding the stress that just the pandemic, just the health aspects, the impact of those health effects. You add that to the shutdown of the economy, including law offices, courts, clients, businesses, and schools. Now, to me, and one of the reasons that all of this started in terms of my reaction to it was that I started getting, maybe a few weeks ago, daily emails from a company called Rosetta Stone. It's a company that gives you, foreign language training. And essentially the emails were things like, well, you have extra time, so why don't you learn a new language? And my reaction was, what do you mean I have extra time? Where do you think this extra time is coming from? Because, for me, I'm still pretty busy with my law practice, and then I'm doing all these other things to try to bring in business. And then add to the fact that I'm home and my kids are home, so I'm helping out in terms of getting them up in the morning, helping them with some homework. Now I'm not like some families who have small children, so I'm not teaching first grade or second grade, but because my kids are in 8th grade and sophomore in high school. So, but they do have questions from time to time that they come and help me. And then, of course, they have their own sort of outside activities that they're doing online nowadays, like music lessons and the like. And so I've been helping out with coordinating some of that. And so it's interesting to think for them to send that email basically saying, oh, you have all this time, when I don't. A lot of people don't. They're doing their job in addition to being a teacher, in addition to being a parent. So they've only added responsibilities since this pandemic started. Some people do have more time. Some people have had, people that have been furloughed. But, even if that has happened, that you're still feeling a tremendous amount of stress because you would rather be working. You'd rather be getting a paycheck from your employer instead of the government. And so there's just this tremendous amount of stress that's going on in everyone's life. And so, as I said, the Emotional Intelligence 2.0 book is where we're going to start in terms of tactics and skills, or tactics in getting better at the emotional intelligence skills. So the skill is how to improve my ability to not let stress get the better of me. And the way to do that, the tactic in the book, is to put a mental recharge into our schedule. And so how do you do that? So the explanation is that when you take time out of your day to get your blood flowing and keep your body healthy, it gives your mind an important break. It's the most significant rest and recharge you can give your brain beyond sleep. While intense physical activity is ideal, other more relaxing and equally invigorating diversions can also have a great effect on your mind. Yoga, massage, gardening, or stroll through the park are all relaxing ways to give your mind a breather. These activities, though none more than vigorous exercise, release chemicals in your brain like serotonin and endorphins that recharge it and help keep you happy and alert. They also engage and strengthen your areas in your brain that are responsible for good decision making, planning, organization, and rational thinking. So it's really important. Everyone knows this. It's really important to get exercise, but things have really changed since this pandemic started, at least for me. Physical exercise used to be um, just an intrinsic part of my life because, I live in the suburbs, but I commute downtown to downtown Chicago for my work. So, I'm driving to the train station, getting out and walking to the train. After the train, I'm walking about 10 to 15 minutes to my office. At lunchtime, I'm getting about 10 minutes of walking to wherever we're going for lunch. Around 3:30, I was taking an afternoon walk about 10 to 20 minutes, and then I was on my way home and walking back to the train and then walking back to my car. And then at night I was roughing hockey. So there was so much physical activity in my life. And now things are much different in terms um, of the exercise that I'm not getting because I'm not doing any of the commuting. I'm not roughing at all. And I also almost feel like it's hard to put that to put physical activity into my schedule during the day because I'm so afraid right now of missing a phone call or missing an email where that would lead to additional business or additional work. So I have a very good communication with the partner that I work with very closely. Um, but I feel just almost panicked about not about missing his phone call, and so it's very hard for me to say, okay, I'm going to go for a walk at noon because oftentimes we have a conversation around noon, and so we don't want. And I think we're doing pretty well in balancing each other's needs and communication styles, but I want to make sure that I'm around. So it's hard to do that during the day. I'm finding it easier if I'm getting up early enough to do a little bit of exercise before my day begins. But we really have to, I think, start thinking about now to instead of just being an automatic part of our day where we're going out anyway, so we're probably going to get some activities, whether we're shopping or walking to our car somewhere, right? Or walking around the mall. Well, we really don't do that anymore. We don't really get out as much. And so I think we really need to think about how we're going to put exercise into our day. And so for our weekly action item, and we're going to do this, we're going to do a weekly action item. It's going to be a tactic to help us improve our emotional intelligence skills, specifically now how we deal with stress. We're going to try every day for the next week to add one 30-minute session of physical activity to your schedule. I don't care what kind of physical activity it is, and I don't care when you do it. But it's important that you do one 30-minute session every single day, and we're going to report back next week. And I want you to record how you feel after your session, and then record at night how your day went, and if you think the exercise impacted your stress level. So again, it doesn't matter what your activity is going to be. You can be, gardening. It could be taking your dog for a long walk. It can be, I don't know, playing shinny hockey with your kids. It can be, watching and exercising while watching a YouTube video that does, it's like cardio, sweating to the oldies. I don't care, Peloton, whatever it is. Just make sure it's 1 30-minute session, at least 1 30-minute session. And then we're going to come back next week and discuss how things went. What I really want to try to do with this book club is to not only discuss the skills, not only have an intellectual knowledge of it, but also to actually put skills into place that are going to help us. And then you can pick. We're going to talk here. I'll just go to the next slide that shows the next book that we're going to do. It's a stress solution. And what I really love about this book is that it gives you a lot of tactics to melt your stress away, to help you deal with stress. Whether that's eating differently or becoming a regular at a restaurant, or which hopefully will be out of a quarantine before we get to that, but meditating, lots of different tactics, but not all of them. You're not going to love every one of them. I'm not going to love every one of them. But if we give ourselves at least a week to work on it, then we'll be able to decide, yeah, that really was great, or that was really terrible, and I'm never going to do that again. But we won't know unless we try. And so that's what we're going to try to do for the next, for forever. When we, end up reading all of the emotional intelligence books, getting through all of the lessons, is that we're going to have a great plan, and we're going to know which exercises work for us and which don't. And so that's what we're going to do. And by the way, just as a little introduction to the stress solution, I found Dr. Rangan Chatterjee's podcast, and he's actually a doctor from the United Kingdom. He's a really cool dude. He, I think he had like a television show where he was like diagnosing people. I haven't seen it, but he talks about it on his podcast. He's a very sort of down-to-earth guy. He's a lot of great interviews that he does, and I'm really interested in trying out some of these tactics in the book. So I hope that you join me each week to have that discussion. And as we close, I just want all of us to remember that emotional intelligence is necessary for all lawyers, and that we can learn these skills together. Please join me next week at 7 p.m. Central Time on Wednesday at this channel. And again, hopefully this worked. It worked this time in terms of audio. I had a little trouble the first go around, but I should be broadcasting on Facebook, on my personal Facebook page, the Lawyers Emotional Intelligence Book Club page, my own Twitter/Periscope account, and LinkedIn, as well as YouTube. So you can find it anywhere on those social media platforms. I'm not on TikTok yet. And Instagram, actually, I did a sort of behind the scenes thing. So if you want to go on my Instagram page, that would be great as well. All of them, I'm at Attorney DSY, except for, of course, LinkedIn. That's just my personal last name. So hope to see you next week. Have a great night, and hope all is well. Take care.